Pierre Bourdieu was one of the most influential social theorists of the 20th century and has reshaped the way that we study social class and understand the power of culture. And his theory can essentially be understood as seeing society as like a role-playing video game, a game where you start with a character that has certain traits, and as you progress through different levels, you collect different types of resources that help you succeed. But if society is like a game, is it one where we just follow rules that other people have invented? Or is it a game where we as characters create the narrative through our own decisions and actions? And what determines who's better at the game than others? To explain all this, we can turn to Bourdieu's theory of practice. One of the central questions in social science is this: are we as individuals free to shape our own destinies, or are we just products of our environments? On the one side, some argue that society determines our actions, and they support this argument by identifying the forces and conditions that define our everyday lives, things like language, laws, norms, religions, and markets. And these are all man-made, but they exist above and outside of your control as an individual. They existed before you were born, and they'll continue to exist after you die. These are social structures. Other social scientists, however, focus on the power individuals have to make their own choices. They don't deny the power of big systems and institutions, but they point to the source of this power being the aggregate of individuals making their own choices. And this is quite a popular approach in classic economic theory, for example, whereby big systems like markets are explained as the outcome of individuals pursuing their own rational self-interests. And in reality, this has always been a spectrum of debate. Even Adam Smith, the godfather of understanding society via individuals' pursuit of their own self-interests, conceded in his lesser-read theory of moral sentiments that institutions and social norms guide behaviour in ways that are crucial to a functioning society. And Karl Marx, who more than anyone influenced the study of social structures, famously asserted that men make their own history, albeit within the parameters of social and historical forces. The key to overcoming this debate was therefore not to prove one side or the other, but to provide an explanation for how society works that effectively incorporates the insights from both. And this is what Pierre Bourdieu did, arguably better than anyone else, through what he called the theory of practice. Bourdieu's theory in a nutshell is that individuals strategically navigate their way through structured environments, and as they do so they collect resources that help them along the way. And one way of thinking about this that I find particularly helpful is to imagine a role-playing video game like I mentioned earlier. You start with a character that already has certain attributes, you then work your way through different levels or locations, spaces that each have their own rules and challenges, and along the way you pick up certain items or equipment that can help you throughout the game. And this is effectively how Bourdieu explains society. If you replace the word attributes with habitus, the word spaces with fields, and the word items with capital, you have the basic components of his theory of practice. But to understand what fields we're all navigating our way through and what resources we're collecting along the way, we need to look more closely at Bourdieu's work. For Bourdieu, society is made up of different fields, such as education, politics, media, the arts. Each field has its own rules, relationships, and power struggles, where individuals compete for status and resources. And Bourdieu himself likened fields to games to emphasize the importance of rules and expectations. As people spend time in a particular field, they develop a feel for the game, as he called it, and believe in its importance. For example, when a student navigates the educational field, first in schools and then in colleges, all the while they understand what forms of behaviour are required of them in these spaces and what rules they must follow and which ones may be bent or broken, and most significantly, how they can achieve success and recognition. So unlike rigid social structures that determine behaviour, fields are dynamic spaces where people act strategically. We don't just follow rules blindly. While fields influence actions, individuals still have choices, much like players in a game. We must learn how to play by the rules to succeed. But fields are also hierarchical, both in the sense that what takes place in some fields, for example politics, has more influence over the rest of society, but also in the sense that within fields themselves, there are people who hold more privileged positions than others. To properly understand these issues of power and hierarchies, however, we need to turn to the resources that people accumulate as they navigate their way through fields, and these are forms of capital. The traditional economic definition of capital refers to resources used to produce value in an economy, and Bourdieu expands on this to outline different types of resources that produce value for people in society more broadly. And just like the gaming metaphor of items collected that help your character overcome challenges or complete certain levels, forms of capital produce value by allowing people to successfully navigate different fields. And in a nutshell, the more capital you have, therefore, the higher your position in these particular fields will likely be. And there are three main forms of capital that Bourdieu theorized, and these were economic capital, which refers to material resources like wealth, property and assets. There was social capital, which refers to resources linked to social networks, connections and relationships. And then there was cultural capital, which refers to educational and cultural resources, including knowledge and skills that confer social advantage. Bourdieu also spoke of symbolic capital, which referred to prestige and recognition, but this has been less developed, so we'll leave it on one side for now. Each of these types of capital can be objectified, that means take the form of objects like books, property, etc., or embodied, which means they can be internalized by people as skills and ways of thinking, or institutionalized, such as those that are conferred by institutions such as qualifications and titles. So unlike Marx then, who spoke only of economic capital, Bourdieu emphasized that all these different forms of capital are important in shaping power and social mobility. This is because, quite simply, if you have more resources to start with, the easier you will likely find it to succeed in different fields and accumulate even more resources. There's a couple of things to note here, however. Firstly, the power of capital is dependent on context. Just as some currencies are useless in some countries, forms of knowledge or cultural capital that might help you succeed in college might not help you if you then get a job as a mechanic. Equally, a network of contacts that you might have built up in the music industry, i.e. social capital, might help you get opportunities there, but they're unlikely to give you much of an advantage if you want to be picked for a sports team. This might sound like common sense, but it's a crucial point that we'll return to later when discussing the implications for social class. Before that, though, a second key point to note right now is how Bourdieu argues that capital is convertible under certain conditions. Cultural or social capital can translate into economic capital, for example, when forms of knowledge and membership to a particular club can help someone secure a financial contract. To summarise then, during our lives we move through different fields, and as we do, we aim to accumulate different forms of capital along the way that help us succeed. Yet, do we all have the same dispositions when it comes to where we choose to go in life and how we make our decisions? Answering this question takes us to the third and final part of Bourdieu's theory of practice. If fields are Bourdieu's answer to social structures because they comprise of rules and norms that guide our behaviour, habitus would be his answer to agency. Habitus refers to the ways we think and act as individuals. More than that, though, it's a term that Bourdieu uses to describe ingrained ways of thinking, feeling and acting, which have been shaped by your experiences and upbringing and have since become second nature. Unlike traditional ideas of socialization that explain how we adopt the values and practices of those around us when we grow up, habitus is about a more embodied experience rather than a conscious process. It operates at a deeper pre-reflexive level, much like muscle memory. For example, when catching a ball, we don't consciously calculate its trajectory, our body instinctively responds. Similarly, language acquisition also illustrates habitus. We internalize grammar and speech patterns at an early age, and so now, when we speak, we don't consciously think about them. Another aspect of habitus is that it's difficult to change. This is because habitus is shaped by prolonged exposure to social environments. So learning a new habitus, such as mastering a different culture's behaviours or ways of thinking, would require long-term immersion in that social world. And even then, say for example you move to another country and successfully integrated into the local culture, you may find yourself yearning for home comforts, missing things from your former culture like the food, the language, the sense of humour, even things like the types of music or sports and the clothes that people wear. And as a result, you may find that you never feel like you really fit in. You don't cherish the same things as the people around you and share the same types of jokes, feel comfortable in the same types of clothes. and this can have a big impact on your life chances. Over time, it can mean that you don't feel confident enough to go for the better jobs, and people responsible for hiring you also might not feel that they click with you. You don't quite match the vibe that they're trying to cultivate in their office. And this is the power of taste, the subject of Bourdieu's seminal work, Distinction. In his book Distinction, Bourdieu shows how our tastes are not just personal preferences, they're shaped by our social position and serve as markers of our social class. Take sports, for example. A working class person in the UK might gravitate towards football or boxing, while the upper class tend to favour activities like golf or polo. Bourdieu's explanation for this is that each of these sports is embedded in a social field where they provide access to different types of cultural and social capital. If you grow up surrounded by wealthy people, that's the group that you want to integrate into and gain recognition from as a human being. You want to impress the people around you so that you're accepted. So you look around and you see what kinds of things people seem to value and respect, and you do those things. This is what Bourdieu calls striving for distinction. It shapes your habitus from an early age, your tastes and routinized behaviors. And over time, it can translate into forms of capital. And this is where Bourdieu's theory really helps us understand the reproduction of social class. Because not only are wealthy people pursuing interests that help them integrate into and successfully navigate social fields full of other wealthy people, working class people also strive for distinction by looking around and seeing the kinds of things people seem to value and respect in their local environment. For example, knowledge of football and the skills to play it successfully are both forms of embodied cultural capital, and they do help you in most working class communities. They help you make and sustain friendships, forms of social capital that then may help you get a job, thus translating into economic capital. The problem is, if you then go to university in a different city with lots of people from middle or upper class backgrounds, suddenly your knowledge may be redundant and your skills may not be valued. Fellow students may be more interested in other sports, and you may find yourself struggling to fit in. A whole range of things might make the place feel alien to you, while those who grew up in a highly educated middle-class family might feel perfectly at home. For Bourdieu, this is how taste is power, because our cultural tastes, while they do reflect our personal choices, they also reflect our social class backgrounds. And so, as we pursue our tastes, we're often accumulating social and cultural capital that helps us further integrate into social fields that we originally came from, rather than those that are higher up the ladder. And it's for this reason that you now see major studies of social class, such as the Great British Class Survey published by Penguin in 2015, centering its analysis around levels of economic, social, and cultural capital. But what does all this mean for you and your personal tastes and your choices? This is our last and final reflection on Bourdieu. Bourdieu's ideas have reshaped how we understand society. Habitus, field, and different types of capital are now widespread concepts across the social sciences, drawn on to help explain everything from education and art to deviance and crime. Yet I don't think you need to be a sociologist to apply these theories. There are many ways in which they can be drawn on to help inform our everyday choices and reflect on our everyday lives. For example, what capitals are you accumulating right now? And what fields are they helping you navigate? In this way, I think there's almost a self-help dimension to Bourdieu's work that, as far as I can tell, hasn't really been commented on. Because while there are some social and psychological issues largely beyond our control, and Bourdieu does talk about this, such as the ongoing influence of our early mental development, or the fact that there are just some forms of capital that are simply out of reach for most of us, Bourdieu's work nonetheless provides something of a blueprint for some of the things that we can do as individuals to more effectively navigate our way through society. And at a time where subjects such as the arts and humanities are under threat because they don't directly train you for a particular job, Bourdieu reminds us that pursuing such cultural capital can indeed help us in our careers, equipping us with the kind of knowledge and skills that can help you navigate fields populated by the highly educated. And moreover, at a time when bodies such as the World Health Organization are declaring loneliness to be a global public health concern, Bourdieu reminds us of the value of cultivating and sustaining networks of social contacts. If there's somewhere that you want to be in the future, I do think it's likely to be very helpful to think through the types of capital that you might need to be obtaining to get there and stay there. So let me know what you think about this. Is Bourdieu's theory helpful for thinking about the impact of our cultural tastes and social activities? And was the video game metaphor helpful? It'd be good to see what some of you think in the comments, but otherwise, thanks for watching.